Good afternoon. My name is Josh Devine, and I am proud to serve as the Communications Director for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. We want to thank you so much for your continued support as we continue the search for Curtis Watson. You're going to be hearing from 4 different speakers. First, Governor Bill Lee, then TBI Director David Roush, TDOC Commissioner Tony Parker, and then Jeff Long, the Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security. We'll take questions after all 4 gentlemen speak. Governor?
Thank you all. Welcome this afternoon. First of all, I just want to express deep sorrow and heartfelt condolences to the family of Deborah Johnson, to her mother, to her daughter, to her sons, to her brother, to her sisters. We at the state of Tennessee and we Tennesseans have lost a dedicated worker, but they've lost a family member, and it's tragic. And I call upon Tennesseans across the state to pray for this family through the deep period of grief that they have. Deborah Johnson was a dedicated public servant to the people of Tennessee. She began her career in the Department of Corrections in 1981 as a correctional officer, 38 years with the department. She served as a sergeant, deputy warden, and most recently in charge of the West Region of Tennessee as correctional administrator. We certainly, her co-workers and the people in Tennessee will certainly miss her, and we will certainly be praying for her family as they walk through this very difficult thing. But through our grief, we now turn to finding this inmate and bringing him to justice. Make no mistake, we need Tennesseans to be vigilant. We need folks in this state, and particularly in the region where this occurred, to report any and all information to local law enforcement and to the TBI. This man is considered extremely dangerous, and we need to find him. Yesterday, we triggered the state prison escape plan, which brings together a multitude of organizations and agencies to deploy as many resources as possible to pursue this individual and to apprehend him. And I want to commend, in particular, Department of Corrections, TBI, Department of Safety. From the moment we became aware of this, those departments have been working tirelessly overnight and all day today, and without rest. You're actually going to hear from leaders of all of those departments, but I commend them for their work. To help in this effort as the governor, I'm authorized to provide a reward, and we're doing so, a $25,000 reward for the apprehension, the arrest, and the conviction of this individual. And we want to remind you, the last thing I'll say is, we need you to be vigilant. We need you to provide information. We need you to help law enforcement, because it's very important to the state of Tennessee and to the citizens of our state that we apprehend. It's important for the family of Deborah, and we appreciate all of your help in apprehending this very dangerous individual. So I want to call on Director Roush, the head of the TBI, to give more information about the actual situation as it exists right now.
Thank you, Governor. And I do want to say that the governor has been amazing in all of this. He has been supportive, and we have been keeping him in the loop throughout this investigation. So all of our resources at this time from the TBI and our effort is all focused in West Tennessee right now in this operation. We have shifted resources from throughout the state to West Tennessee as this is a priority. Our crime scene was cleared this morning at about 4:50 a.m. Our violent crime response team was able to complete their efforts on the scene, and so then What happens from that point forward is they will bring all evidence here to headquarters to be processed. And I do want to announce that we are currently working with the DA as I speak to obtain warrants for homicide on Curtis Watson. So he now moves from the status of a person of interest to a suspect in this case. There have been no credible sightings at this time. We have checked all potential leads and information that has been provided to us through a number of resources. We ask the public, as the governor mentioned, to continue to be vigilant and to help us find this very dangerous suspect. Those in the area specifically, we're asking you to check your property for things that are out of place. Looking at things like food supplies and sources and vehicles, outbuildings, dog houses, anything where a person might hide, to look around. If you're not comfortable with that, call local law enforcement. They will absolutely assist you in that effort. We're asking them to look at their trail cameras, as well as checking on their neighbors. I think that's critical at this point for those who live in the area, to check in with their neighbors and have a regular check-in to check on each other while this suspect is at large. He could be anywhere. We need Tennesseans, as well as our partners throughout the bordering states, to be vigilant on this. He could be outside of Tennessee. We're asking that anyone and everyone pay attention, and if you sight this individual, do not approach him. He is extremely dangerous. If you see him, call 911 immediately. I will now turn it over to our Commissioner of Corrections, Tony Parker.
First, I want to thank Governor Lee for your leadership, sir, and the assistance through this very, very difficult time. We in the Department of Corrections recognize that you've been with us and offering support from the very beginning of this process. Our efforts to locate inmate Curtis Ray Watson are continuing this afternoon, and we are asking members of the public to remain vigilant and to contact the TBI or your local law enforcement immediately to report any sightings of this dangerous offender. The Department of Corrections is grateful for the assistance that we are receiving from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, Tennessee Highway Patrol, local law enforcement, the U.S. Marshal Service, FBI, and the ATF. We have teams that are following up on leads as they have been brought throughout the night and into the early mornings. And let me reiterate some of the things that Director Roush has said. We're asking members of the public to be aware of anything that looks out of the ordinary, such as missing items or anything that appears out of place. We're asking residents that may have surveillance cameras on their property or trail cameras to please check those and report any information that looks suspicious to the TBI or to local law enforcement immediately. We have placed this offender's photo at several locations near and around West Tennessee Prison, as well as on social media, and we ask members of the public to please share that information. We would discourage any pedestrian traffic near the prison. Please stay away from the area because, remember, we still have an active search ongoing. I also want to thank you, the media, for your coverage of this situation and for helping us get the word out. Let me emphasize that we will not rest until this offender is brought to justice. We're thankful for the outpouring of support that we have received from the local community as well as the corrections family from across this country. We ask that you continue to keep Deborah Johnson's family as well as Deborah's work family in your prayers today and in the days to come. This time I'll turn it over to Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Commissioner Parker. As the governor said, the governor's escape plan was implemented Based off of that, the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, particularly through the Tennessee Highway Patrol, is involved with the Department of Corrections and TBI in the perimeter and setting up roadblocks in that area. We ask the public to watch for those roadblocks, watch for those points, cooperate with our officers, and we'll try to get you through those areas as quick as possible if you need to be through that area. I want to assure and reassure the community and the people that live in the community around the facility. We are not going to abandon you. We are not going to leave you until we know that your community is safe. So we will remain there until he's apprehended or we have assurance that he's not in that area. So I want the community to know that we're there with you on that. I also want to say that our prayers go out with the Department of Corrections, in particular with Ms. Johnson and her family, that we certainly want our prayers and thoughts with them. And this has been a cooperative effort, and we look forward to continuing with our highway patrol. We have 2 strike teams that we have placed in that area and have other strike teams on standby across the state if they're needed. Also, we're providing aviation support for the manhunt, and we'll continue to do so with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers, and we also want to say thank you to Colonel Stewart from the Tennessee Highway Patrol for standing in solidarity. At this point, we'll open things up for questions, and a caveat is you can imagine this is a very fluid situation. You will have a lot of questions that we're not in a position to answer at this time, but we'll certainly try to do our best. Nancy?
For Commissioner Parker, please. Watson was convicted of a number of violent crimes. Why was he in a minimum security prison?
Let me just say, first of all, our focus right now is on capturing this individual. Any review of policy or procedures, we will review those after this incident is over, but I will say he qualified to be in that location. But our focus right now remains on capturing him at this point.
Do you know what time Deborah Johnson was killed?
I would turn that over to Director Rouse.
Yeah, at this time, we don't have the timeline. We know when she was discovered. We know we have some time frames on when the suspect was seen around the property. But in terms of actual time of death, the autopsy has not been completed at this time.
Do you know what time she was supposed to be at work?
Her work site was, at that day, as my understanding, she had a meeting scheduled with the warden early that morning. Her regular work day is from 8 o'clock till 4 or 5 o'clock. But like many of us, that is very flexible. Sometimes it starts earlier or later. But on this day, she had a scheduled meeting with the warden that morning shortly after 8 or 9 o'clock.
Was someone sent to inquire about her when she didn't show up?
It's my understanding that someone did check on Deborah, yes.
In her role, in terms of Ms. Johnson, did she have regular contact with inmates and with Watson anymore?
So Deborah had been in the department for 38 years. As I said earlier, she had a great relationship with both staff and inmates in the TDOC system. A lot of inmates knew who Deborah was. She was very personal, and she was very respected with the inmate population. In regards to this particular inmate, I don't have any knowledge of specific communications or a direct link with the inmate, but it's not uncommon for her to know these inmates that work on the property.
And she lived in the property?
She lived in on state property there in a residence on the property itself.
Commissioner, I wonder if you would have any personal memories of Deborah or anyone else for that matter that you'd care to share?
Deborah was just an outstanding professional. She was a true corrections profession in every way. Everything about Deborah exemplified professionalism and her care for both the people she worked for, worked with, and the inmates that she served on a daily basis. Deborah was just a great people, and we will never be able to replace someone like Deborah Johnson.
Let me point out something on the question about the locations. We have a map up here, so there are 2 pinpoints on the map. One is the residence where the crime occurred. The other is where the tractor that the suspect had acquired and abandoned is at. So kind of gives you a feel for the distance is about 2.1 miles. And then we're searching all of that area actively right now.
Can you just where the tractor came from? How did it come about to get in possession of the tractor?
Mr. Watson had access because of his job duties to the tractor.
You do have this map here. Can you kind of reference, although we can kind of see some of it, just kind of what the terrain looks like? What is the area out there?
Sure. Obviously, as not uncommon with most of our facilities, most of the TDOT facilities, it is in a rural area, so it's very rural. So when you see the spots, this is the crime scene. Here's the tractor recovery. All of this is very rural, mostly flat area, farmland that you see here, and then there's this wooded area here as well as surrounding this area here. There's a community right here that all of those folks, law enforcement has, as well as all law enforcement, TDOC and safety and local law enforcement as well has gone to every one of those residences and checked with those individuals to make sure they were safe. But that gives you a kind of a feel for the area we're talking about that we're currently searching.
2 more questions, please.
At this point, do you know how the inmate came in contact with Ms. Johnson and how she was killed?
That's all part of the ongoing investigation, and we can't get into that yet.
We've heard of sightings in Marshall County and also Henry County. Can you talk about those?
Sure. We've had now over 75 tips that place the suspect in a number of places throughout the state as well as other states. And so we are following up on every tip that we receive. The ones that we feel are most credible, we're checking them first, and then we're working from that. But there have been a number of alleged sightings. We have yet to locate him at any of those places that we've been reported.
Did Ms. Johnson live alone?
I believe she did. Did she live alone?
Yes, she did.
Thank you so much. Feel free to go ahead and exit. We want to thank you guys so much for your continued coverage and your continued interest in this. A few sort of things to sort of highlight for you. So the governor announced a $25,000 reward. That's in addition to the $2,500 reward that TBI has offered. And we're also able to tell you that thanks to the generosity of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the total reward now stands at $32,500. So ATF has kicked in $5,000 to the reward fund at this point. Again, that's for information leading to the capture of this individual. As you heard the director mention, our violent crime response team has finished their work processing, but that doesn't mean that our agents' work has completed. We're continuing, as you heard the director say, to do search efforts and also conduct interviews in connection with this ongoing investigation. TBI is involved in the search for this fugitive and the investigation of Ms. Johnson's death. So we have a couple of different arms going at this point. The bottom line message for the public that we're trying to convey, and would really appreciate your help, it can feel extremely powerless in this type of scenario. We want folks to know they have power. They can do something. They can search their property. They can search their crawl spaces, that old barn in your property, that garage, heck, that doghouse. It may be the one thing that leads us to this particular individual. If something seems out of place, by all means, contact law enforcement. If something is missing from your property, be it food, clothing, equipment, firearms, weapons, whatever, contact local law enforcement and report that immediately. Again, to the media, thank you so much for your partnership in spreading this information and spreading this guy's picture, and we will continue to do what it takes to get him off the streets. Any sort of follow-up questions before I leave, Nancy?
Judge, can you go through again what the total amount of reward is now?
Right, so the governor has announced a $25,000 reward, ATF has announced a $5,000 reward, and TBI's reward at this point stands at $2,500 for a total of $32,500.
Can you talk about what kind of technology you're using in the search? Like, are you using drones with infrared cameras?
Sure. So we're using any kind of technology that we have available to us. Obviously, we're not going to talk about everything that we have at our disposal, but one of the resources that we are using is TBI's aircraft. As you know, that aircraft played a pretty significant role in the recent situation that we had in Westmoreland. And so we're continuing to fly in an effort to hopefully locate him that way. We also have agents assigned to our technical services unit who specialize in digital forensics, who are chasing down any available leads that might present. I certainly don't want to go into specifics at this point, but suffice to say, if there's something we can do as an agency to locate this individual, we are presently doing it.
So in other cases, sometimes in Amber Alert cases, things like that, TBI's come out and said, look, we've had an abnormally low number of tips.
Right.
Just relatively speaking, what is the tips, the volume of tips looking like
Right.
now?
As you heard the director say, at last check, our tip total stands about 75. And obviously, each and every one of these is a different circumstance, so it kind of becomes apples and oranges to compare. However, you've got to remember, this is a really remote area where this individual disappeared from. And I think at this point, that's why we wanted to come out strong today and say this is an issue for all of Tennessee to care about, because the reality is this individual's been missing for a day, we don't know where he is, and he could be anywhere, which is why we need everyone to pay attention to his picture, be on the lookout, and report anything suspicious to law enforcement. We don't know, did he get in a car and was he taken from that area? We don't know, is he on foot and holed up in the woods somewhere? We honestly just don't know at this point.
Josh, I have a question in terms of the property. We can talk a little bit about it. So she lived, Miss Johnson lived in the property.
Right.
Okay, and is that like normal? Is that something that with other penitentiary facilities?
The Department of Correction can provide specifics about this. It's my understanding they have a number of properties that are residences that are on that specific property, state property, where certain staff members live full-time.
Do you know if they have any security?
That would be a question Correction could address.
This might be another thing that you don't know yet, but any reason to believe that he might be armed or have a gun, anything like that?
We don't know. And that's why it's really important for people to check their property. Because if someone notices, I have a firearm missing, or I have a knife missing, or I have a weapon missing, that would be something that you might want to report to law enforcement. We just don't know.
Do you know any firearms were taken from Miss Johnson's house?
I don't. Not that I can speak to at this point. All right. Again, the best way to contact our office for follow-ups is tbi.media@tn.gov. I do not anticipate that we'll offer another briefing today. That could change. Obviously, this is a very fluid situation, so be sure to connect with us on social media, primarily Twitter. TB Investigation is where we are breaking new information and new details. In fact, during the news conference, I was able to get a picture of the clothing that he was last seen wearing. So I'm going to shortly put that out on Twitter to give you and to give the public our best guess of what he was last seen wearing.